I mean, the size is just comical. I mean, like, there's a lot of things you listen to around saying like gaming is bigger than movies and films combined, right? That's a very real thing. But even then, people misunderstand how big gaming is.
Akin, I am so excited for this, my friend. We've known each other for a while. I'm so thrilled that you took the time to join me. So thank you so much.
Man, it's such a privilege. It's an honor. I do have to say, first of all, on a personal level, I really love you, really. On a professional level, I think most people don't know, but we have an amazing professional relationship. You're an investor in our business as well. And we'll talk about kind of startup advice and all of that, but most people don't know you're actually a media entrepreneur, not just any VC. For me, it's such an amazing privilege to be here. You're one of the very few people I tell my kids about at dinner table. I say, Uncle Harry did this, I want you to do this like Uncle Harry when they were, and it's not me blowing smoke up your ass. This is really legitimate, and I'm really, really happy to be here.
I mean, poor kids. One, that will lead to Wandsworth Prison. But no, it's funny. I always say when I think about you and Leo, these are the founders where whatever they were doing, they could be selling kitchen knives. You just want to give them all of your money. But no, I was talking to JC before the show, and he gave me this very apt description of Turkish Muslim sent by your mother, not by the government.
Yes.
Yale HBS. Give me the snapshot. Like, how did that happen?
Sure. So I grew up in Turkey until I was 16, and I was this mega nerd. I was in like the math Olympiad team, and I was one of those people that I was social, but I wasn't, externally facing, externally friendly. My mother came in one day, and my mother's not for the faint of heart, and she said, I decided to put you on a exam for the Rotary Club to go to the US. And I protested, and I said, I don't want to. I'm happy here in Turkey. And she came and she said, fine, you can be a garbage man then. And that was the end of the discussion. So next thing I knew, I was in a exam room with the Rotary Club. I went to the US into Wisconsin. And you took a math nerd from Turkey, put them in Tomah, Wisconsin, where not only people did not see anybody from anywhere else, people never saw anyone with dark hair. That was an incredible experience. I was the outsider, and that was a very defining moment for me. If I made it in Tomah, I could make it anywhere. So I stayed on in Wisconsin. I love Wisconsin. I love the U.S. Met my wife in university in Wisconsin, studied there, went to graduate school. I thought I wanted to become a professor. Absolutely horrible idea for me. And just like what most people don't, most people that do consulting don't know what they want to do with their life. That was me. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life at that point. Decided to just stop graduate school, left Yale, went to McKinsey, spent 2 years at McKinsey. I absolutely hated it.
Why did you hate it?
It was a very rigid environment intellectually. There was a way to do things, and if you didn't do things that way, you would fail, right? And at the time, I couldn't articulate it, but I, wasn't the type of person that would, necessarily follow the rules. I wouldn't kind of do the way they wanted me to do the analysis and so on and so forth. But the analysis I did was correct. But, so I couldn't just bring myself to act a certain way and just kind of think the McKinsey way. I thought a little bit different. And that made me, not a very strong performer. Initially, I was a very strong performer. Towards the end, I was, not a very good performer at all. So I then left and I went to work for the United Nations for a couple of years. And that was awesome, right? That was a great experience. Except, I realized quickly there's not much money to be made there. So then I decided to learn more about the world and this thing called business. So I went to Harvard Business School. And that was a very interesting experience.
Was it transformational for you?
It was, in many ways. In the good way and the bad way as well.
What was the good and the bad way?
So HBS was a place where I struggled a lot to fit in initially because there's definitely a lot of, there's an HBS way of doing things again, right? There's a group of people who are, you can smell them a mile away. They're the HBS people, right? And initially, the first year, I really tried to fit in with that crowd. And
you're not that crowd.
I'm not that crowd. I'm not that crowd, right? So then I realized actually it's okay, and I tell this to my daughter and to my son all the time. Is like, it's okay to not fit into that crowd as long as you make your own kind of friendships and your own circles. So the second year I did much better. I actually kind of was okay. I was at peace with not kind of fitting in, and I was just much more happier. So I think a lot of the people that I met, so HBS is around 900 kids every year, and it was transformative for me, not because of the things I've learned, because I didn't learn much. But I did learn by talking to people what they are, what they do, who they are, what gets them motivated. And I learned through those conversations a lot about the, business world, how people think, what drives them, what motivates them. Yeah. That to me was very transformative. And, the friendships that you form at HBS, you take them with you for life,
Yeah.
So that was very good.
So we take HBS. How do we land at Facebook?
So after HBS, I went to work at Skype for a couple years. I worked for Josh Silverman, who's now running Etsy.
Yeah, I had him on the show 2 years ago.
He is awesome. I actually listened to that. He's awesome. Very, very nice. That was an amazing experience. Skype was very much like Facebook in the early days, engineering culture dominated by very strong, technically apt engineers.
Can I ask, what did you learn from Skype and your time at Skype that you now apply or have taken with you to managing and leading at Tripledot?
I learned how to ruthlessly prioritize. So Skype was a very small company. At its peak, I think it was about 300, 400 people. And it was dominating the voice over IP market, and it could have dominated so much more. It was spun off from eBay, acquired by this investor consortium, sold it to Microsoft for, I think, $8.1 billion. And Skype was an engineering-led organization. And being engineering-led, there's no room for fluff. And I developed a very strong, I would say, distaste for fluff while I was at Skype. And that really forced me, when you're talking with an Estonian engineer about the total addressable market or what's Skype's position in it, etc., you learn very quickly to get to the heart of the matter very, very fast.
I struggle with this because I similarly have a distaste for fluff. But when I come in and say, hey, forget all the bullshit, like just show me last week's performance. People like, Harry, that was too cold. It was jarring. Yes. And actually you need to be warmer.
Sure.
And I struggle with the balance. How do you retain that humanity with kind of let's get to the heart of the problem?
A lot of it has to do with my personal style, and I think... So first of all, I'd be very surprised if you are as cold as you just made it out to be. I think you mean well, and anyone that knows you knows that you mean well. And the same, anyone that knows me knows I mean super well. I mean, one of the things you told me earlier was that I'm too nice.
Yeah.
That is probably true. And I lean into that because I am a nice person and I am not an asshole. And when I am saying something... let's talk about last week's numbers, people know it's me just really wanting to get to the core of the matter. I have almost zero ego and, so I think it's just this, I hope people know what I mean when I say, let's talk about the bad performance last week or so on. And I think a lot of this I learned at Skype, and this was done via many, many, many interactions with very apt Estonian engineers. That was just something that was...
So we take this concision or focus or prioritization. Tell me, then we moved to Facebook?
Yes. So actually, in between, when I was at Skype, I was presented with this world of mobile gaming. So, I'm not a gamer. I don't have a console at home. But I learned about this game called Zynga's Farmville back at the time. And
I loved Farmville.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh my God.
It's still around. Right?
I didn't know it was still around.
It's there's like Farmville 3 now. It's amazing.
Does it still make money?
It still makes money. It's not as big as it once was, But the thing that was absolutely amazing at the time, I read a statistic somewhere that there was more tractors being sold in a day on Farmville than anywhere else in the world combined. And now it seems like almost like a foregone conclusion, but back then it blew my mind. And I started to get into it a little bit more and actually started playing it myself. And it was very different in terms of a game design philosophy. The games that I knew, you would play for an hour a day continuously, and you'd be done with it and you'd go do your homework. This was, I kept coming back every 30 seconds and, whatever it was, and just trying to do something in the game. And that element of understanding the psychology behind that actually made me interview at Zynga. And this was in 2010. And back then I was told the culture at Zynga was not very good. I had classmates from HBS who were working there, so I ended up not taking that job. But I got bitten by the gaming bug, effectively.
And then joined Facebook?
Yes. So I went and I flirted with the idea of going to Turkey at the time, because my wife, who's, by the way, the most absolutely incredible woman I've ever met in my life, she is irrationally attached to her family. So she said, let's go be closer to our families. And at the time, Turkey was growing in popularity as a destination. I had many good friends who started businesses in Turkey and said, let's go see what this Turkey thing is about. So for a couple months, I actually joined this company called Peak Games out of Istanbul as an advisor. And they were making Facebook games at the time. And through that, I met Julien, our common friend, and joined Facebook, and decided not to move to Turkey at the end, and instead came to London.
So I'm sure Julien was fishing here, but he asked, when you review the time that you had at Facebook, it was such a transformative time for the company and for you, I'm sure. What were some of your biggest takeaways from being at Facebook?
Yes. Facebook was an incredible place. I mean, I really absolutely loved spending time there. And I think my Facebook experience probably is very different than a lot of people's Facebook experience because I was in London. London felt like a startup within Facebook at the time. And a lot of that credit goes to Julien, who's like the best boss I ever had, right? He was awesome, and I still owe everything I've done to this day to him. And he'll say I'm bullshitting, but it's true. And the biggest thing I learned at Facebook actually is things are never as bad as they seem and never as good as they seem. So it's a very stoic thing to think about. And this I actually heard in all hands with Mark. And when I joined Facebook, it was 2012, and soon after Facebook launched their mobile offering, right? Because they were getting really heavily criticized about they don't have a presence on mobile, they missed the boat on mobile.
Sure, it was one of the reasons for that IPO tanking.
Exactly. It opened, I think, $38, went down to $19. My wife said, hey, are you sure that you did the right thing by joining? And I was like, I actually don't know, but I think so. And I remember Mark being extremely calm and actually almost in a way confident. And that to me at the time seemed a bit wrong almost because, and when I came to the kind of the ground floor, I understood that he believed in what they could do as a mobile offering, right? The people were just spending insane amount of time on their mobile devices in Facebook at the time. And Facebook invented a new type of ad unit called the mobile ads at the time, but really it was mobile app ads. And fast forward to this day, is 90+% of Facebook's revenue is coming from that. So I remember how calm Mark was, and he did say things are never as bad as they seem. They're never as good as they seem. And I that's the one thing I learned. When things are going, absolutely horrendously, I try to stay as calm as possible. And when things are going, incredibly well and so on, I try to bring a sense of realism and,
It's a really interesting kind of element of my investing that's actually changed, which is like, I always used to love young founders.
Yes.
And the truth is with young founders, they're much more volatile to swings, good and bad. Yes. And I find actually with, respectfully, older founders, Akin, that you're just much more tempered.
Yes.
Good, bad, that actually what matters is your child's health. What matters is the family that you have at home. Yes. A day performance on Facebook doesn't actually matter.
Exactly. That's such a good point because it will all be okay. We will all be okay at the end of the day. There are times when, you have to act and you have to act with, gusto and you have to kind of,
What was one of those times at Facebook when you had to act with gusto?
There were so many.
Was there ever a time when it was as bad as it seemed?
So I do remember when we launched app ads originally, and this will sound comical, but obviously it was not a foregone conclusion that those ads would work because they are a new ad format. They're native ads. And when we launched those, I got so excited that I went and kind of told all the partners that were working with Facebook at the time about this amazing thing and so on. I remember all my partners being extremely frustrated that these ads weren't, because it took them, 6 to 9 months to figure out. I remember there was a famous bug on Facebook Android that just, these ads weren't delivering and there was something wrong. And that moment I remember thinking it is, this may not work because it's just, the performance of the ads were not there. And all my partners were pretty frustrated with the performance and so on. And I thought maybe it's not going to work. Yet, there was somebody that discovered a bug in Menlo Park. I can't remember exactly who it was, whatever. But it was a step function change. Over a week, these ads started delivering and, and fast forward, I think there was a period of time when I think 5% of Facebook's mobile revenue was coming from like 3 developers in Russia at the time, which is absolutely incredible, right? This is how hungry they were for this kind of offering. And they were game developers, and game developers are always very hungry to adopt new things that might be game changers.
Please, dear God, tell me you hired them for Tripledot. Okay, before we dive into the meat of the show, so we have that amazing experience at Facebook.
Yes.
Tripledot founding.
Yes.
What was that? You know what, darling? I'm going to leave the well-paid job at Facebook and I'm going to found a game studio in London with my mate Leo.
Yes.
How's that come about?
Sure. So there's actually interim step. There's a guy that I really love called Humam. He was the chief strategy officer at Activision Blizzard.
I spoke to him before the show.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Very curious.
He's coming on the show, actually.
Is he?
Because I did a reference for you.
Okay.
And then I was like, actually, you'd be fantastic on the show. Will you come? And he was like, totally. So we've got him coming
He's
on.
great. I do owe him. He's like, I do owe him so much. He's an absolute amazing guy. I worked with Humam when I was at McKinsey in Stanford, actually in Stamford, Connecticut, back in the days, 2004. He was the chief strategy officer at Activision, bought King, and I joined him at King effectively. One of the biggest reason I joined King was because Humam was there. And I wanted to have a proper game company experience because at Facebook I had an inkling that this is what I want to do, is start a game studio, but I didn't really have a proper experience. So joined Humam at King, and it was great. But the thing that I kind of realized is, when I joined, King was also a large company, and I left Facebook because I was frustrated how big it was and how bureaucratic everything was getting. And there's a saying called, a camel is a horse designed by a committee, and Facebook was designing camels all the time. And I left and I joined King, and King was a larger company as well. It wasn't obviously as big as Facebook, but I wanted to do something that was much more impactful. And I knew Lior, for many, many years from my experience at Facebook. And I actually initially reached out to Lior because, we wanted to do a project within King that, I thought maybe, we could get him interested. And through that, we started kind of conversating again. And the thing that I remember specifically about Lior was, here's a guy who's, exceptionally smart. But what impressed me more than that was how good of a person he is. And, he's just a good person. He has an amazing heart, always tries to do the right thing. And it's very rare. Like, before meeting Lior, one of the kind of porn that I heard in the startup world was that, successful founders are always assholes, right? This was the thing that I kept on hearing.
Still hear it today.
There you go, right? And
or are they a monster?
They're a monster. Machine. They have this insatiable inner thing, etc. And I met Lior, and he was none of those things. Don't get me wrong, he's not a motherhood and apple pie kind of guy. He's Israeli, spent 8 years in the army and so on. And also Eyal, our third co-founder, right? They were just Like, they're the type of people, if something bad happens to you, you want them taking over your family affairs, and you want them to make sure that your family is well taken care of. And, he's a guy who successfully sold a business to a publicly listed company and still goes home every night at 6 p.m. to have dinner with his family. That was incredible. Like, I was like, that is someone that I want to learn from, I want to partner with. And that really drove the decision beyond anything else. And at the time, I was looking into, actually on the side, I was developing some of these games myself, like Solitaire and so on, because the thesis was, gaming will always be, I'm simplifying to make a point, but, there will always be a market for Solitaire. And I felt that I could and we could out-execute some of the other companies that were making Solitaire games. And as we started to talk more and more with Lior, I felt that we were thinking very much on similar terms. So that's kind of how it all started.
Man, I absolutely love that. And when you're also describing Lior, I'm like, he is the definition of like ruthlessly effective in the most productive way.
Yes.
But incredible. No, I love that. So you mentioned kind of startup porn or mantras that we hear. You gave me quite a few before we did this, and I love them. And so I want to start with one. And it's the idea that you have to be passionate about essentially your domain that you pursue.
Yes.
You have to choose something that you love. And you say that's not true.
I think it's absolute bullshit. Excuse my French, but...
Why is that?
So I have many friends, successful entrepreneurs, and some of them, actually one of them lives in Canada, and he is in the insurance space. And I can guarantee you he's not passionate about the insurance space. I've never met a single person who is passionate about the domain of insurance. Maybe you might have, but I haven't.
Terribly boring. I'm so bored by insurance.
And so that's just not, true. He's very successful. The business is very successful. I'm the living example of this. I think, Tripledot is a company that's doing quite well, but I'm not a gamer by definition. Now, it depends on what you mean by gamer, but any kind of definition you have, I am not a hardcore gamer. I do like games. I like the business of games. I like the philosophy of games, but I'm not a gamer. I am passionate about winning, and I think that's the biggest difference, because I think, I invest in a lot of companies as myself as well, and I think the thing that people, like, I guess, working with me is, I don't have this incentive to give people this startup porn advice, right? I say, and there's a lot of them out there. So I think being passionate about the domain that you're in is great. It's a luxury. It's not a must to have.
I think a lot of people say if you're not passionate about it, and I agree with you there, but I think a lot of people say if you're not passionate about it, when the hard times come and it's a bad day, you'll give up. Yeah. How do you respond to that?
I think you have to be passionate about winning. I think we're all wired differently, right? If you're passionate about winning, when the hard times do come, and they will come, in anything in life, then you need this internal engine to propel you through. But that passion doesn't have to be directed to the domain. I think it's a very Western-centric view of the world to think that you have to be passionate about the domain that you're in. And I think that ends up actually in quite dangerous territory, because a lot of people who are passionate for winning, who are just, hard learners, hard workers and learners, they end up not pursuing perfectly good, lucrative jobs because of this kind of advice. Sure. Don't get me wrong, if you're one of the few people that have, like Eyal is a great example, right? Like Eyal was born to be in the gaming industry. If I saw him doing anything else, I would forcefully take him out of there and then put him in the game industry. But that's a luxury. That's not the rule.
I don't know if you've actually seen studies on post-baby effects, and it analyzes entrepreneurs post having a baby, either man or woman, but actually they are like significantly higher likelihood to be successful. I think it goes back to your thing, they might not be passionate, but actually you have the passion to succeed for your child's welfare, for their life to come. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely. That checks out so much because earlier at the beginning of the show, one of the things we talked about is how much I respect you, right? And I think you're unstoppable because you have a why, right? The thing with your mother and, that's your why. And As long as you have a why, you can bear anyhow.
Yeah.
So you just have to find your own why. That why does not have to be the domain that you're operating in.
Sorry, I'm fascinated. We always hear this, like, people are scared to say, like, actually, I'm doing it for the money. I really don't. Do you think we are overly cynical about people who do it for the money, and we kind of actually stigmatize it wrongly?
That is such a good point. Absolutely. Yes. It's okay to do it for the money.
Yeah.
It's okay. I'm not doing it for the money. But you know what? Money is a great plus.
Sure.
I mean, money doesn't buy you happiness, but it can eliminate some forms of unhappiness.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of people fetishize this kind of, grandiose meanings in life and, what it means to have a mission statement and you put it on the wall. And I just think there's just so much there's just so much lack of genuineness around this that, you know what? A lot of people are doing it for the money. Other people, like me, we're doing it because we think we're good at it and we want to win. And we just happen to found something that we are good at doing. And that drives us. You might be doing it for, your mom, money. I'm doing it for my kids. I want them to be proud of, these are all perfectly acceptable solutions.
The lovely thing about us being so close is like we can have a very frank. I always was doing it for the money.
Yeah.
Always. But then the hardest thing came when I actually kind of had a little bit. I can be frank. We had $1 million on my balcony. I was like 21. And that's like, I watched Who Wants to Be a Millionaire with Chris Harris.
Yeah.
Then I'll be happy. And I didn't have any friends. And I didn't really have anything. And I had my mother and that was it.
Yes. Yeah.
And then that was a really hard moment because you're like, well, then I don't actually know what makes me happy.
Yes. You know what? That's why the relationships that you form in life are the true wealth. They truly are. But it's such a human nature to want to experience the good things in life and to, and money is, money probably shouldn't be your number one goal.
Yeah.
But you know what? If that's what drives you, and that's totally okay.
I wish people would come into hiring processes and say it if it is, because I would structure incentives to make them get more money if they achieve goals.
Yes.
But they don't. They talk about their passions and their visions, and it's like not their passions and visions. Now, another startup porn thing that you said, which I loved, was you have to be solving a real problem.
Yes.
Again, didn't agree with that one, did you?
Yeah, I mean, this one is so look. The world doesn't need another solitaire app, right? So from that lens, we really weren't solving a real problem, right? And I'm not necessarily super opposed to this in the sense that, like, I'm not advocating you don't solve a real problem. I mean, of course, if you happen to solve a real problem, that's fantastic and more power to you. But how many, aspiring entrepreneurs I've spoken with that just thought this was the starting point. This was the point they get off the ground. And the fact of the matter is true innovation happens through iteration, right? You start working on something and you iterate, you do this thing 1% different, this thing 1% different, and then the aggregate impact ends up being something completely innovative. So I don't like this advice in the sense that I don't think it's necessarily just false, but I think it's a bit misleading because it's okay. We started out building a solitaire app. One of the companies that I was very fortunate to partner with is Dream Games, and they're building a match 3 game. And you know what? World has plenty of match 3 games, but theirs is performing much better now. So, there's this thing that you have to be, solving a real problem of building something that doesn't exist. And if you're lucky enough to find something like that, by all means, I'm not disparaging that, but not everyone has to do that.
So I have so many things to unpack. You said there about kind of the iterative element.
Yes.
I always believe that, especially pre-product market fit, when I look at my seed investments, the biggest determinant of whether they reach or not is their speed of execution.
Yes.
Their speed of in between iterations.
Yes.
Do you agree with that focus on speed and speed of execution?
Broadly speaking, yes. This is not something that, I have, I can't say that, speed is very important, right? But the porn around speed is something that I'm uncomfortable with because speed of execution allows you to do more iterations than others, right? But there are points that this is a road and the road has curves. And you know what? When you're approaching those curves, sometimes you have to just slow down and actually think and take your time. So I've seen, many companies in Turkey, also in Israel, where I also do quite a bit of investing, that they have this mantra and they put it on the walls and say, speed overall, speed above everything else. And sometimes, just sometimes, they are too fast when they approach one of those curves and they go off the cliff. At Facebook, we had these posters, right? They said, done is better than perfect. And then I agree with that in general, in spirit. But when you go over to finance, they said, done is better than perfect, except in finance. Right? Sometimes done is just more important. And the perfect example in gaming for this is there's two brothers called Igor and Dimitri. They're probably the best kept secret in mobile gaming, Playrix.
I've heard about these guys. Tell me about these guys.
It is an absolutely incredible story. They are two brothers who started building, they're from Vologda, Russia, right? Middle of nowhere. They started building games. Initially, they started building games they were pay-to-play games, not even free-to-play, which was the revolution in gaming. I met them in 2013 in Moscow when I was working at Facebook. When I told everyone about, like mobile games, free-to-play, everyone jumped on it. And I remember talking to Igor, and Igor was kind of quite careful, and he kind of just wanted to, see if this Facebook thing was real. And so they just took their time. But when they executed so well. They weren't necessarily prioritizing speed. And today...
What do you think they did to execute so well?
First of all, I think they really... and this is a bit anticlimactic because there's no silver bullet in execution. I mean, we are, as a company, we pride in ourselves very, very strong executors. And when people say, what do you do when you're that good? The answer is really not one thing. It's just we pay attention to details. We make sure that, what matters we spend a lot of time on, and what doesn't matter we don't spend that. And that judgment is something that's really, you develop it over a period of time. It's not something that can...
It's so funny. One of my great friends is Gustav Soderstrom, who's the CPO at Spotify. And he says details are not details, they are the product.
Absolutely.
And I 100%. Love that. You also mentioned that, kind of going back to the, you don't have to be solving a real problem. And actually, great business, Tripledot's a great business, are built not necessarily solving a real problem. How do you advise founders who think, well, I need to articulate that we're solving a real problem to raise money, to raise a pre-seed round, a seed round? How do you advise them?
It's a great point. I think it depends a little bit on their backgrounds, right? If they are, let's take gaming, for instance, and Dream Games is a perfect example of this, right? These are guys who's built 2 hits before, Toy Blast and Toon Blast, when they were at Peak Games. And when they came out, with the kind of idea of starting a new studio, my advice to them was, you guys may not know how good you are, so you don't even need to tell people what you're going to build because it's going to change over time. And that was true, and that resonated. They had, I think in their pitch deck, they had like 7 slides, and 3 of the slides talk about who the team was and what they've built before. Because truly, no one should care. Like, if you simplify it to its core, what you say you're going to build is going to change. I don't care who says what, it will be different. So to me, if you have the strength to lean on your previous experience, I would say lean on that, right? But if you're a first-time founder, if you're a brilliant guy out of university, if you're a Facebook engineer, and you have to justify what you're going to build, you just have to play the game. So then I advise them on how to play the game and how to communicate what they're going to build in a way that's defensible.
The hardest thing for me as an investor, and I use you as the example here, I knew you well before I invested in Tripledot. It was the easiest decision ever. Trust you to the hills. Okay. It's just so easy. I don't have that luxury with 99%, like you don't when you meet a founder. So and attribution's hard.
Yes.
You said there, say what you've done and articulate your credits. But attribution's not always true. Some people take credit for things they didn't do. How do you think about actually determining quality in those people when you don't have that historical relationship arc?
Yes. I think, it's not an easy thing. There's, again, no silver bullets because every rule we generate, we can, come up with counterexamples. But in my experience, the people that will succeed, if you kind of look back, they'll have grit, they'll have perseverance. They're the ones that actually respond to you right away. Like, you don't want someone who, when you're communicating with them, take their time to respond to you or whatever it is. But those are signals. How do you get down to the core? I don't know. It's a very hard question. I think it's like falling in love. If you told me to write an algorithm to fall in love, I couldn't. But you know it when you see it, kind of thing,
I totally, thanks, Akin. I totally get you there. Next startup porn man, I'm loving this. We should do a show together. Fuck 20 VC. We should just call it startup porn man who's disabled. Okay, you said when you do this startup, your life will now suck for a while. That's just how it is. I've heard this many times. I've actually said it. Why is this wrong?
That's just wrong, because yes, there are cases that will be the case, but depends on what you mean by your life will suck. My life didn't suck when I was building Tripledot. My life, and not because I wasn't working like a dog, but my life, when my life sucked, when I was working 2 hours a day towards the tail end of my career at Facebook. By all measures, it was supposed to be super comfortable and, whatever, I was cruising, right? I was barely doing any work at all.
What are you doing when you're doing 2 hours a day? Because we hear about this rest and vest.
Yeah.
You just sit in the canteen and
you spend enough time to learn the inside of the machinery, and you develop an expertise in just kind of punting away responsibility, right? To spend time enough there, and but you know what? My life was absolutely miserable because nothing I did actually mattered, and I was always very frustrated because I couldn't, have any impact whatsoever. And I was always, was like, am I going to be found out? Like, are they going to realize that I'm doing basically no work here? And that was not easy, right? That was not good. Compare that to Tripledot, where I was working, very, very hard. But, I was loving it, and my life didn't suck. There was some psychological challenges. I used to think about, my HBS friends who were working at Goldman and getting whatever, millions of dollars a year. And I was basically making, no money whatsoever initially, right? That part was, hey man, I have a family, I have a kid. But that's when really kind of trust and kind of the camaraderie comes in. Because then I look at Eyal, I look at Lior, and I say, you know what, we're in this together. This is kind of, the family kind of thing. And, your life doesn't have to suck. It genuinely doesn't, We talked about work-life balance. I do agree that work-life balance is not true in the standard sense of, you work, you finish your home. You work, you finish your work, you go home, and then you chill. That's not work-life balance, right? If you're lucky enough to be doing something that you like, and I don't mean it in the startup porn way, right? That you're excited about, you're good at. You go home, you sleep, and you're thinking about your work. And that's why I feel fortunate. This is kind of what I found with Tripledot. So, your life doesn't have to suck. Yes, you will work hard, but you know what? You can manage your own time. You can manage your own schedule. And life doesn't have to suck.
Speaking of managing your own time and schedule, I hope it's not too personal, but we were chatting about it before, and you spoke about how you structured your evenings.
Yes.
Can you just talk to me about that, how you structure your evenings, get in the time with family and the work? What does that evening look like for you?
Yeah, so, we talked a little bit about my wife, and, she's such an amazing person. And frankly, when I was working at Facebook, I traveled quite a lot. And, early on when we were building Tripledot, I would spend a lot of time, either on the road or whatever, working. When things, in the last 2 years, actually with COVID, what we learned is that we are more masters of our own schedule and destiny than we think. So I started basically making a point of trying to be home every day by around 7 o'clock, spending that time with the kids. And it's not much, it's 2 hours a day, but, it's great for them, it's great for me. And I put them to bed every night, and basically between 7 and 9 it's family time, and I try to do nothing related to work between 7 and 9, And the more you do it, the more it gets known, and people just kind of start auto-censoring it. And then from 9 onwards, 9 to 10, I take a personal break. So every day for about an hour, I watch TV, I play some chess or whatever it is. And then from 10 onwards, I do work. And that's the work that I actually think is kind of my maker time, effectively, meaning, during the day, it's easy to get hijacked by meetings and this and that. But, from 10 to 2 or 10 to 1 or whatever it is, you have just effectively me time that you're actually able to do whatever you want to do.
No, I totally get you there, and I love that. I think it's so important to have that family time, and you're right, I think it does get known internally. One thing that I think is funny is, and kind of correlates to this, people say it doesn't get easier. It doesn't get easier. Akin, I'm going to be fucking honest with you. It does. I mean, for me, I get San Pellegrino delivered. We sit in a nice studio in Belgravia. It gets easier.
Yes.
Do you agree it doesn't get easier, or are you with me it does get easier?
I think it does get easier, right? Because I think it changed, the nature of the problems change. It's like when people ask me about kids, when you have a small kid, you worry about something relatively minuscule every single day, maybe every single hour. You worry, is he breathing? Is he turning? And as they grow older, the magnitude of the problems increase, but their frequency decreases. So now with my 12-year-old daughter, I worry about, is she hanging out with the right friends? And if she's not, how can I change that? And, I think it's very similar to work. When we first started the company and, it was different, but it was a different type of different. Now we're in a place, our daily worries, our problems have changed. And to be honest, personally, having more money than I did before, it definitely helps. It kind of allows me to focus on things that I want. Sure. The biggest problem it solves for me is I don't have to spend time to optimize for an unknowable upside in the future.
What do you mean by that?
Sure. So when we started the company, and even when I was at Facebook, right, I would become an advisor to company X. And the reason I would do that is, hey, what if, they do something really well in the future? I could have some upside and so on. And I spent a lot of time with people, frankly, that I shouldn't have spent. And when you have more liquidity, when you have more money, you don't have to do that. You just can say no to people that you just don't want to hang out with. Because frankly, you don't need the XYZ amount from that interaction. So it does get easier in that sense because you have more freedom. I guess what I'm describing is you have more freedom over your own time. You don't have to say yes to people that you don't want to.
I'm just wondering why you still hang out with me then.
So I told you, I love you, and I do genuinely find this, I think what you're building, and this is not, again, blowing smoke up your ass, but I think what you're building here is going to be incredible over the next 5 decades. So this is kind of the time horizon I'm looking at you, and I'm saying, okay, when Harry's 76 years old, when he looks back what he has built, I think this will be the 5 decades of Harry because of the way that you operate, the relentless execution, and the most important thing is you have a why. So once you have the why, and that's a very personal why, that's not a why that can be satisfied. If your why was money, there will come a point where you'll have, diminishing returns. Your why is very personal. So that's why I'm here. I don't really, honestly, frankly, I'm not here because you invest in our company because, thank you, but that's not why I'm here.
I totally get you. You mentioned a word there, being focus.
Yes.
And you said actually that, planning it allows you to have more focus.
Yes.
But another, porn mantra that we're disembarking or disabling here is focus is everything. You should focus on a single thing early on and do it very well.
Yes.
Heard that many times.
Yes.
Why is this wrong?
Yes. Look, I'll give you a personal example. We when we started Tripledot, early on, internally, we developed a technology inside Tripledot. And this may actually not even be a very well-known story for you either. This technology was developed inside Tripledot, and this was not our core area of focus, right? This wasn't something, like we're a mobile games company. We're supposed to be building mobile games all the time. And we developed this technology to enable us to better build games. But then we saw that this piece of technology had such a product market fit in the market that we didn't even know about. And we decided to spin this off into a new entity called Luna Labs. And we, basically partner with, another entrepreneur and some of my team from Facebook. And but we were very involved. So if in those days someone who was preaching the gospel of startup porn met us, they'd say, you guys are absolutely doing the wrong thing. You're kind of divided between two projects and, this and that. And you know what? There's maybe some element of, I understand that kind of why they're saying that. But Luna was sold within 2 years to ironSource for a pretty healthy amount. And we were able to execute across both paths together, right? So I'm not necessarily anti this message, don't get me wrong, but the message is given with such certainty that if you're an entrepreneur, that you hear this message, you say, okay, I must focus on only one thing. But no one tells you what to do. What if that one thing is the wrong thing, right?
So do you think this is and I really actually quite like misalignment, because I think no one talks about misalignment. Everyone's like, founder, VC is so aligned. There's not. There's like clear areas. Here, to me, that is an area where you can diversify your risk.
Yes.
Create separate pools of cash potentially for you.
Yes.
And that's freaking awesome.
Absolutely.
But for me as an investor, now obviously I'm investing afterwards, I'm thrilled that it worked so well, but it is still a diversion of attention.
Yes.
And that's not in my interest because I don't have holdings in Luna. Do you think that's a misalignment between founder and investor?
So in our case, again, this goes back to, Lior always doing the right thing. I always try to do the right thing. What we did was precisely because of that. We said all people who invested in Tripledot basically will mirror the cap table to Luna.
Oh, wow.
So Julien, who was an investor in Tripledot, basically became an investor in Luna. Without actually investing extra capital into Luna. And when we sold Luna, they all did really well. We didn't have to do that, but we did.
That's really good. I did not know that.
Yeah, so there are ways to address those misalignments, but the core fundamental problem here is when you say you must focus on this thing, I think the spirit there is that, you must not spend your time at whatever conferences or this. I do buy that. I think you must focus on execution. But this is said with such certainty that I actually have people that, I have spoken with that listen to XYZ podcasts, and, some VCs are really, dangerously prominent in social media, and they say, focus on one thing only. And these guys come to me and they say, well, I focus on building this type of game and I'm going to spend my 3 years building this type of game. And I tell them, okay, but what if it doesn't work? What if you're focusing on the wrong thing? So that judgment, it all comes down to basically judgment, right? That judgment of what are you focusing on? Are you focusing on the right thing? Or you need to have some breathing room to allow yourself to pivot if the thing, you talked about diversification. Yeah. That's so important early on in the journey of the startup. So,
unpack that for me. That's a great statement. Why is it so important? Because again, that goes against the core ethos of focus, do one thing well. Why is diversification important?
Because at the beginning of a startup, right, and in most cases, we took a different route. We went after a known market. We took on execution risk, right? But if you're a startup that is trying to create a new product that doesn't exist in the market today, right, you might very well be kind of developing something and bumping your head against a wall, right? And the message is focus, but that actually reads not as focus as just keep bumping your head against the wall. And that is a very dangerous advice because, the real, strength in that case is to know how to pivot. Yeah. And there you cannot be formulaic about this. There's just no silver bullet about when to know to persist versus when to know when to pivot. That probably is the singular biggest determinant of success.
I think that there's one question that I think is really important to ask yourself when questioning that. Yeah. And it's, do you still have more experiments which you're excited to try?
Yes.
And if the answer is no, I think that's the time to pivot.
That's a great way to put it. That might be the formula. That might be the formula, But reality is sometimes you just don't know what experiments you want to do, So no one can tell you, deterministically, you have to start and focus on this thing and keep going. Focus is important, don't get me wrong, but it is important. You need to put an asterisk, right? You have to focus on execution, because in the early days, nothing else matters. PR doesn't matter, brand doesn't matter, it just doesn't matter. You have to be focused on execution. Now, within that constraint, you have to leave yourself room to pivot into XYZ direction.
I agree, and I actually disagree. I think that PR and brand, often it's a bit like culture, and it's a bit like hiring diversity, which is people go, at a stage of time, I will focus on it. Yeah. But at that stage of time, you're 50 white dudes in an office, and it's really hard to layer on diverse candidates, diverse team members. I do think you need to think about it super early. I spend a lot of time with companies on, bluntly, brand and PR early, because otherwise you get to a stage and journalists who the fuck are you?
Yeah, no, I think, culture is what happens when you're not looking, right? I heard this somewhere, and I think this is one area of porn that I can't subscribe to. It's, culture is truly what happens when you are not looking. But I do think that you can spend time on building a brand and building a PR, but that might be time that you're not spending in solving the core. It just depends on the situation, right? My kind of whole beef with this my beef with this whole startup porn is that it is given with such confidence and such uniformity that the truth is it just depends on the individual founder, the individual company, what problem they're solving. If you can afford the luxury of thinking about brand and PR early on, more power to you, then by all means you should do that.
Yeah.
But oftentimes these are, competing things. So,
And I sometimes see it get well ahead of product and product execution.
Yes.
And then you're in a really dangerous territory.
Yes.
I think a lot of founders are too good at selling themselves and not selling their companies these days.
Yes.
Speaking of which, we mentioned culture there. Mission and vision.
Yes.
Wonderful things. Aren't they wonderful? You've said before about them being sometimes a challenge. And so I guess, why do you believe that mission and vision statements are usually bullshit?
Yes. First of all, when I think about mission and vision statements, right? First of all, and this might be just my shortcoming, right? Throw my hands up. I often have to Google what a mission statement is and what a vision statement is, right? And I've spent enough time across multiple companies to, I should know the difference, but I don't. And the reason I don't know the difference sometimes, right, before I Google.
I don't actually know the difference now.
See, so 99.9% of the times that you craft a mission and vision statement is because someone tells you we have to have a mission and vision statement, right? Because otherwise, your mission statement could be, I want to make as much money as possible, right? And that's okay. But no one is going to have a mission statement that says, I want to make we exist to make as much money as possible, right? Why is that? I don't know. I think it's kind of weird, right? This is not, we do want to make as much money as possible as Tripledot. But, if you look at a company like Facebook, for instance, I actually wrote it down. It's something like, give people power to build community and bring the world closer. I don't know what that means at all.
That's not their mission statement, is it?
It is. I have no idea.
It's too long, one.
Yeah. I don't know what, give people the power to build community. I genuinely don't know what that means.
But Zoom is bringing happiness. You're like, that's quite generic.
That's right. Yeah. And actually, I was talking with a colleague of mine, Alex Verbitsky, before the call, and he told me about a time when, they were at a WeWork offsite. He used to work at WeWork, and it's a European kind of, management offsite. And they were talking about the mission and the vision, and the guy who was leading Europe at the time said, I got a text from Adam Newman and said about the new mission statement. And it was something like elevates the world's consciousness. And literally 30 seconds later, they got another text saying, hey, we have a major problem because the toilets are clogged in the Waterloo location. It just does not reflect why you get up and come to work every day. I would challenge any Facebook employee to, in their heart of hearts, tell me they go to work every day to, elevate the world's consciousness or whatever it is, give power to build community. Most people don't even know what that means.
So should we not have them?
I am not suggesting, right, that just killing them is just the antidote. Like, I think there's a time and place, right? But I do think, why have statements when, really most of your employees are going to think it's bullshit? I think they serve a purpose. And the purpose is, if you articulate them well, and if you're honest with, what the company's mission and vision is, I think they can serve a purpose, right? If you ask me what they are for Tripledot, I will have to look them up, because the reality is Tripledot exists because, and this doesn't make good mission statement, vision statement, but we want to build a generational company, right? I remember now, Tripledot's mission, I think, or vision, is to be the world's leading data-driven entertainment company. We spent a lot of time crafting that.
I like that. That's not bad. It's not fluffy.
It's not fluffy because it could be even less fluffy, right? It could just be, but the people around the table, when we were crafting that statement, we just despise fluffiness, right?
I think ours is building the next generation of venture at the intersection of venture and media.
See? Okay. So that. It's not something, if you put up in the wall, people are going to be like, oh my God, come on, that's bullshit. It's like, that's why I'm here. Yeah. That's what I do every day. That's what makes me get up.
We use media to be the best fucking investors. Yeah. I got told I couldn't swear in a vision statement. In fact, it was too direct.
Yes.
Okay, so when we double down on this, mission and vision is important for attracting the best talent. Yes. So I'm loving it. Seriously, I think you could do a show like startup mantras, like just totally ruined. But you said hiring people with domain expertise is tricky.
Yes.
And so you don't often do it.
Yes.
Why?
So there are times that we do it. Of course, there are times, like if you are a game studio, you have to have a 3D artist that, is, the subject domain expert, etc. I think when I look at, for instance, our marketing department, the guy who's running the marketing department for us does have experience in marketing. But the people who are, really the kind of folks that are, reporting to him, that are running day to day, we probably have the strongest marketing team of any gaming company I know. And those people is the first time they all worked in like a gaming company, more or less. And the reason for that is marketing is a field, and you could talk about this for many other things, is like any real relevant domain expertise you want to have, you can really learn it in a several month window, right? If you want to learn marketing, you could learn it in 6 months.
Sure.
But those people, they are coming from very good schools. They are all incredibly self-driven people. They're all hungry. I think the key word is hunger. They're all hungry. They all tend to be kind of, type A level overachievers that are insecure. And I don't mean this in a bad way. I am a very insecure person as well. So those people, they will just, kill themselves to, make sure that the job gets done. And those are that is a trade that I don't think you can, I think that's very innate. I don't know if you can teach that to a person. You can teach marketing to anyone. You can teach pretty much anything you do. Even what we discussed, 3D art, you can teach it to a person. You cannot teach the hunger. And this is very true. So the reason it's not like we don't hire experts, right? But the reason we actually prioritize hunger in the interview process is a very counterintuitive thing to do. Because imagine you and I start a company, right? And you know X, I know Y, but we have to also do Z, take marketing, for instance. It's very tempting for us to say, you know what? Let's hire person X from that company who's been doing this. And in a way, it's a mental offloading. You're offloading the burden by hiring someone else who's done that. But the context is different. The thing that they are doing has moved on. They were doing it in a different company with different constraints, with different things. Everything about it is different.
So I've got so many things. First off, like hiring for hunger, I agree. Yeah. I've got this wrong 90% of the time. I thought they were hungry. And honestly, I think this generation is fucking lazy. They do not work. Sorry, I'm on a rant now.
No.
They do not want to work hard. They do not want to come into the office. They get paid top dollar. And actually, they want great package. They want all of this. And they don't work hard. And so I've misjudged hunger. Have you misjudged hunger? And what have you learned from your hiring success or failures in this?
Sure. I mean, we have 450 people, I'm sure, and okay. we get things wrong all the time. But I think what we do get right is we have a very high standard in terms of hiring. To get a job as a marketing analyst at Tripledot, you have to pass through several case interviews. You have to do modeling exercises. You have to talk to so many different people that have different levels of intellectual aggressiveness, right? And if you pass through that filter, no one can, tell you you're not hungry. Or, if you just kind of it's like, converting to Judaism or something, right? Like I have a friend, Antonio Garcia Martinez, who is a Twitter personality who converted to Judaism, and it's just like if you're that kind of going through those hoops, then I think it's maybe you do belong there, right? So our process is very rigorous, and if you just make it through that process, then you do know that you have a certain baseline of not only intellectual curiosity, but also hunger and rigor as well.
What happens if you don't have the skill that you're hiring for? So say we're an early stage company,
yes,
and me and you are the co-founders, and we're hiring a sales person, leader, rep, whatever
yes,
it is. Me and you've never done sales before.
Yes.
So we can't teach them really, can we?
Yes.
So should they not have, what do we do then?
I think, look, there's always room for someone who's an expert to teach, right? So in that case, if you and I just start hiring people, maybe we should hire someone who has some idea about sales, right? But you'll be surprised how easy it is for that knowledge to be gained, regardless of the field, right? There are resources. There are just so many resources available for someone who wants to learn sales, right? There are books written on SaaS sales. There's just so many things you can do. I'm not suggesting you read a book and you're an expert, sure, but it can be solved. It's a solvable problem. You can hire a consultant. You can hire XYZ, right? But the act of bringing someone into the company has to be very slow. The fact of actually parting ways with someone probably needs to be very fast. Sure. That's something we are trying to stay close to in the business. And there's a place for expertise. Don't get me wrong.
What have been the biggest hiring mistakes you've made?
It's a very good question. First of all, I mean, we're a living organism, right? So we'll know in a couple of years much better. But if I look in the past, it has been those cases where we've hired for etiquette. So you hire someone who's worked at gaming company X, and you say, "Oh wow, they're super senior, they've done this." They even, check out in terms when you do due diligence, etc. They even check out. And oftentimes they don't work out. They come in, they say, "Oh, this is how we used to do things there." And, the organisms are very different potentially. This is,
I actually say that the rate of decay on operating experience has never been greater because of two things. One is actually, I think, AI fundamentally changes so much about prior stacks. Yeah. I think you could say the same for cloud, actually, in on-prem in some enterprise cases. And then two is COVID. It fundamentally changed how a generation feels about in-place motivation, in-office work, all these things. And so I totally agree with you there. Next one, which I loved. As an investor, this made me so happy. Valuations do not matter. Remember this, founders? 1 on 5 works well for me. You didn't say this in your funding round. Valuations do not matter in the long run and are dangerous. Break this down for me. Sure. Why do they not matter?
Sure. So this time I would say the porn is the entrepreneurs are sometimes guilty of subscribing to this type of porn. I've seen many, many cases of companies that are really attracted to saying, hey, our last round we were valued at X. And valuation to me can only be useful if it's a meaningful heuristic for future potential cash flows, right? But valuations now are a measure of what that market's FOMO is for that business. And, we've just seen during COVID times, you could literally get your grandpa start a gaming company. You could probably get funded at, $100 million valuation. And then, it's very, very easy as a founder to let that get to you, right? In your mind, all of a sudden you have, let's say, 55% of the business valued at $100 million. And now you're thinking, okay, I have $55 million. Truth of the matter is you have nothing, right? It's just all paper money. Not only you have nothing, oftentimes the mistake is, it could go the other way. And we've seen this when valuations have corrected. You've so many people ahead of you now in a potential liquidation, right? You have, preference, you might have debt, you might have all sorts of things ahead of you. And you've hired people now and you have to give them options, and they have exercise prices, and to exercise those options, and we see this a lot more in the US than we do in Europe, but they have to take out loans to exercise their options. And when the valuations come down, not only they don't have money anymore, but they also are in debt. So that is the nightmare scenario. And valuations it's basically the message here is that it ain't over until the fat lady sings, as they say in the US, right? So valuations are a heuristic. They could be a healthy heuristic, but they could also be a dangerous heuristic. And so long as you measure, I think it will be valuable if you treat valuations as, okay, this is what my potential future cash flow can be. But it's just a number, right? It's just a number. It doesn't really, this is not the perfect number to capture the essence of your business, right? It's just what the market perceives, what the market values your business and the domain you operate in, etc.
First question, do you think anyone in Europe actually gives a shit about equity? I find that actually it's a lot more of a cash-based culture in Europe versus US.
Isn't that crazy? Yes. I mean, yeah, it's a good point. So what I can tell you that, we have operations in Eastern Europe, and I have had a lot of conversations when, we may want to give someone equity and they're like, no. And actually the perfect anecdote for this is when I was at Facebook, people were getting free food, right? And, back then Facebook folks would complain about anything, right? And they would complain, why are you giving me free food? Give me more money instead. And, some of the conversations I've witnessed in parts of Europe is, I don't want equity, I want more cash. And, I do understand kind of in a lack of a sophisticated enough startup ecosystem why this might be the case. But, if you apply any type of regret minimization, right, to this, I think, you will regret not getting that equity for your sweat, blood, and tears.
Well, it's an interesting one, actually, because pre-product market fit startup, I'd almost be like, load me up on cash.
Yes.
There is a 95% chance that we won't make it to any form of meaningful outcome. Load me up on another 25K.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it depends on your personal situation, right? I do believe that, technology is the biggest enabler of wealth and the biggest contributor to human progression. And if you're a, hungry guy, if you're a hungry girl, a hungry person, if you're a, smart, driven person, within a long period of time, you will make a lot of money. Right. You just almost can't afford, you just almost can't not, right? So, if you have to have the cash to, continue your livelihood, then by all means. But, I do think that you will regret in the future a lot more not having more upside in a case of, the company becomes very successful than the opposite.
For you as a founder hiring people, when they say, hey, give me cash,
Yes.
are you like, oh, Because
Yeah.
I've had this before, and
Yeah.
it's quite disheartening.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit cultural dependent because there are parts of Europe where that's just not a thing. Like people think you're trying to pull a fast one on them if you say I'm going to give you equity, and so it is case by case. But if you have a person in the UK or in the US and you're trying to hire them, you're trying to incentivize them, and they're saying I'd rather have cash, then it does signal that at least we're not thinking about this in the same way. We do M&A. Tripledot is very actively doing M&A, and we look at different companies to buy, and the same is true even for companies. And sometimes we offer them a cash consideration, sometimes cash plus equity. And the cases we love is when we might offer someone a total consideration amount and they come back and say, hey, can I have Tripledot equity? Because it just shows that they believe this is the perfect way to create a win-win, and they believe in our story, they believe in our vision. Yes, it's different. You can't say it's the same.
I agree. A final one before we move into gaming, which I do want to discuss, but you were named the fastest growing company in Europe by the Financial Times.
Yes.
An amazing achievement. What do you think UK politics could do differently around accreditation, around salutations?
Sure.
What do you think we could do differently?
So I think I am quite a political person. I do like to get involved, and without getting into too much specifics, right? I'm not a conservative. I've never been, right? But I do actually like the fact that Rishi is, the prime minister. Out of all the kind of candidates, I actually think he has a pro-business agenda, which I really like, and he has this kind of ability to articulate a vision that is, tech friendly. I always said, actually, when I contrast the US and the UK, it's such a phenomenal contrast because I spent 16 years in the US and 11 years now in the UK. And I think, people call me sappy for believing this, but, the US, I still subscribe to this, American dream, and you can feel it, you can breathe it. And this is super energizing for a foreigner. You go into the US, no one asks you, the first question is never, where are you from? Never. It's almost rude to ask someone, where are you from? The first question always is, what do you do? Contrast that to the UK, where the first question cannot be, what do you do? It's rude, right? It's almost rude. It's like, where are you from? And, the way it manifests is that I have friends who are third generation Turks born in Germany that they cannot say we're Germans, right? So I do think there's a big missed opportunity because the amount of talent, the amount of academic talent in the UK is immense. UK is a hub for, bringing people. And look at us. We have 2 Israeli founders, 1 Turkish founder, who decided to build this company in the UK, created hundreds of jobs with a very pro-business government. And, I'm sure he's very busy, et cetera. And so I'm not, complaining. But, if my message was, hey, I'm going to build a poster child of, UK equals success equals tech and business. Sure. And then Financial Times, who's a, well-established paper, not only names something like, fastest growing games company, it's the fastest growing company in Europe. And that happens to be in my backyard. I would try to create a lot more kind of political capital around that. So,
can I ask a bit of a divisive one? Do you think Europe on the whole is a bit fucked?
I don't think they're fucked. Why would they be fucked, right? If you look at the average European, I think it depends on your definition.
Like decreasing growth rates, increasing regulation specifically around AI.
But take a look at their life, how they live, right? And people vote.
Sound like a true European,
right? People vote by their feet, right? And this is why I also don't think America is fucked. And actually, if you look at net migration of any country couplings, net migration into the U.S. is more than net migration out, right? There are more Germans going to live in the U.S. than Americans going to live in Germany. And the reason for that is just more opportunity in the U.S. And I do think that Europeans are not fucked because they live, relatively healthy lives. They're, making good money. So if you think very basic core human level, I don't think they're fucked. I think they're living good lives. Now, if you ask for business competitiveness, yes, of course, there's a lot of, regulatory red tape, and there's a lot of problems with bureaucracy, and, you mentioned AI regulation, all of that. And I mean, we've lost months of productivity over something silly called GDPR and et cetera, right? But I just don't think fundamentally, that matters in the grand scheme of things, because in the end, people here live high quality lives. And that's why we're here. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm not living in, somewhere in Africa or Asia or whatever. I want my children to have, a good education, access to good healthcare, etc. That's why we're here.
Are you ever tempted to move away with taxes? Like when you look at Italy's 100k tax, you look at Lisbon, it's tempting.
It's not tempting enough to upset the settled lifestyle that I created for my children. Yeah. Right? My children are very British, which is hilarious thinking about it now, but they are very British, and they have friends here, they have schools here. My wife loves it in Richmond, where we live. So I just don't have, no amount of tax is going to, really make that a huge difference. I actually think that if you ask many, many people, my daughter has an American passport, and sometimes people tell me, oh my God, aren't you worried about the taxes and stuff? And I respond to that by saying the amount of opportunities that will be unlocked for her by having that passport in the future, I think far offset any kind of administrative headache or even the tax burden that she will have. So it's just, in the end, it's all a balance of, what kind of lifestyle you want to create for your kids.
I agree, unless Keir Starmer comes in and raises capital gains tax and fucks us all. In which case, I will see you in Lisbon.
Well, by the way, that's why I actually mentioned, I actually do admire kind of what Rishi is trying to create as a narrative, as we're pro-business. And, I think it's super important. I think, businesses, small businesses especially, are the driver of any growth in any economy around the world. So I do believe, but, unless I'm paying every single dollar that I've earned, I don't think that it's worth upsetting the lifestyle I created for my kids.
I do totally get you in terms of the trade-off there. I do want to touch, before we do a quick fire, on just gaming, because I think there's just some classic mistakes that people make. The one I hear all the time it's such a hits-driven business, huh? Is that fair?
I do understand why people say it, right? I think if you look at the history of gaming, you look at console, games developers, and I think there has been a hit-driven nature historically. However, I think people say it and mean that, success in gaming is random. I think it's all, people don't really mean hit-driven. They say just, no one knows how successful you are. With mobile gaming, I do take issue with that. I don't think it's a hit-driven business. I think it's a data-driven business. And I think you need to create hits, but the way you create hits is very, very different. Again, I can give many counterexamples. Playrix is a perfect example. They've had 4 hits. Tripledot, we have multiple hits under our belt. The guys that are at Dream Games, they had multiple hits, on and on and on, right? And if you look at the business as a whole, the success of a mobile game has nothing to do with how you make the game. It's all about how you operate the game. And how you operate the game is not, I think a lot of times people think about gaming and they think about people in, dreadlocks sitting in a room with bean bags and just kind of ideating stuff. That's not at all how it works, right? It's just all about how you operate the game, what decisions you make, very analytically driven. And live operations is such an integral part of how to make those games work and scale that it just, by definition, it cannot be hit-driven, right?
Would you ever invest in a founder who's never created a hit game?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
You wouldn't rely on that as a historical data point that's they know how to do it?
No, not at all. I have invested in founders who have not created a hit game, because I think it's about, articulating kind of what you've learned in that journey, and the best part about investing in the domain that you've spent time in is you can ask very pointed and, to the matter questions. And I can say, tell me about how you would think about XYZ, and, how will you market this game? How will you, monetize the game? What are the things and you can really form a mental picture of how they think.
Do you worry about being the expert investor? So I missed Riverside, which is a great, podcasting tool. I missed Descript because I was like, I know this better than anyone. I've done 3,000 shows. Idiot expert. Do you worry that you know too much to actually be an effective investor? You're not. You're a fucking great investor.
I don't worry about it because I think, if I don't invest in a company, there's always a reason at the time that I don't invest in it. And, hindsight is 20/20. There will always be misses that, as an investor, you will not participate in XYZ. Like, that's just part of what you have to be comfortable with.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to learn from those misses, but you can't really just go back and say, oh my God, why did I miss that? You can't beat yourself over the head too much.
What's the biggest miss you've had?
Okay, so here's one. Look, it's not like if I was asked for it or not, right? Because at the time I couldn't invest anyway. But I know Lior invested in Moon Active early on. And it's not like I was asked to invest, but I knew that they were raising money at the time and so on. So if I really wanted to invest, I could probably get in. That would be a great investment. But the reason I struggle with it is because I was not investing at the time per se. But that's a perfect example, right? Like Moon Active was not an overnight success story. It actually, Mooley, who's a very, very dear friend, he went through a lot of trials and tribulations. And I now, knowing the Mooley that I know now, like if I had the kind of vision at the time to potentially invest, I would love to. Lior did, and he's very happy. So.
I want to get back to the gaming before we move on. You hear about gaming market misconceptions. It could be size, it could be timing. Yes. What are other things on the gaming market where you're like, people get it so wrong?
Yes. I mean, the size is just comical. I mean, there's a lot of things you listen to around saying like gaming is bigger than movies and films combined, right? That's a very real thing. But even then, people misunderstand how big gaming is. People think it's, $150 billion business. It's way, way larger. My favorite example to give, it's a bit of a cheeky example, but there's a game called Pachinko in Japan. And Pachinko is this kind of like Japanese version of their, I guess, slot machines, etc. And there's Pachinko parlors in Japan. And the average revenue per year from Pachinko is larger than the Japanese auto industry, which is several $100 billion a year, right? So if you just take that sliver of information, that is a type of game that might not be mobile gaming, but that's people actually spending real money and time and energy playing games. That is not included in any gaming market size estimation.
Is that casino gaming? Are they playing for money?
So actually, if you go to a Pachinko parlor, you cannot withdraw money due to regulation. So you get kind of like different type of toys, etc. And then you have to go and, change those toys in a next door shop for money. And it's just a whole system that they've articulated. So
would you not say that's gambling, like bro to bro?
But gambling is also a form of gaming. I'm not saying necessarily that, gaming is big because of gambling, right? But, you take a look at social. I would even venture to say, there's not a lot of people that can actually look under the hood between Candy Crush versus Slotomania, because match 3 games, you could actually make a very credible argument that they are social casino games as well, the way that it's kind of, architected underneath. So, the point is, it is a misunderstood market. The size is not really known. If you look at all these market sizes, like they don't actually include gaming-related ad tech. They don't count how we make our money, for instance, because we make our money mostly by showing ads.
Sure.
And those market size estimates, they don't count companies like us, for instance, which is absolutely crazy. And the other thing I would say is that people have this misconception in their minds that gaming folks tend to be these uber creative types that are hanging out in a beanbag in a room, But that's just not the case at all. Like the day in, day out of gaming companies is very, very analytical, very kind of, it's, if you take my daughter into gaming, into Tripledot, she might think she's, in a hedge fund, given some of the discussions that are taking place. It's all math, analytical, data-driven decisions. So
no, I know where I'm stealing marketing people from now. At least. Be a really bad look when a VC value add. He just nicks my talent. Something really pisses me off is the revenue multiple assumption. It's like, it's like shitty quality revenue, so we should apply terrible revenue multiples to it. How do you feel about the revenue multiples applied to gaming companies?
I mean, I think it's a, I think it's not totally fair, to be honest. And the reason I struggle with this is, let me give you an example of a gaming multiple versus a software as a service multiple, right? Gaming companies are valued, 3-4 times revenues, whatever, future looking, backward looking, however you want to do it, right? Roughly. Whereas software as a service company can be anywhere between 10, 20, 30. In the height of COVID, it was even like 100 times. Yeah. You mentioned one time you were looking at a company that was 1,000x, right? So, but if you look at the gaming cohorts, if you look at behavior, these are really, really sticky games. The games that we do, people play these games for a very, very long time. They become part of people's lives. So
at what point do they become part of people's lives? Because when you see like Candy Crush,
yes,
like that 6-year life or whatever it is that they've actually endured is so strong. I know obviously the company's much older, but the actual games, at what point is it part of someone's life and do you see that retention?
So there are different retention metrics we look at, right? But the retention metrics we look at are really, really long term. Like we don't really look at day 1, day 7 retention anymore. We look at really long term retention.
Is that day 365?
Day 90, day 365, day 540, day 720. Those are the metrics that we try to kind of really look at. And you have to keep in mind, mobile gaming is a new industry. It's only been around for 10 odd years, right? So people don't really form an opinion about what mobile gaming good looks like, right? They just kind of think, okay, these are the norms, these are the metrics. The other crazy thing is, not only, mobile gaming is new, there's just so many more type of games that can be done. I mean, when Candy Crush came into the market, everybody said, oh, it's too late to build another casual game now. Candy Crush took all the users. Then came the Playrix brothers, right? They introduced this meta game concept on casual games. And everybody said, okay, now it's too late. Now it's done. Then came Peak Games and introduced a different game built on the idea of a game that actually King had. And everybody said, now it's done. Now it's for sure done. And now there's Dream Games that is doing something. Now, you look at all those 4 companies, the core is just one type of game, right? It's a puzzle game. Imagine how much more there is, how much more content you can create, how much more innovation you can do. There's just so much more to go. And I think that's what people don't fundamentally understand about gaming.
What about Subway Surfers? This game is like 16, 17 years old, no?
Yes. An
incredible story, no?
It's an incredible story. It's the core mechanic is what we call a runner mechanic, and it's one of the most downloaded games. And that actually shows the power of gaming, right? It's like if you look at any platform, and this I learned from Julien, if you look at any platform, from Microsoft to Facebook to mobile platforms to VR, AR, whatever, gaming companies are always in the first place to adopt those platforms, right? Microsoft platform, you think about kind of the games. Same with Facebook. Facebook platform became synonymous with first Farmville, and Candy Crush. And Subway Surfers is a perfect example. There are still people that I bet you money that get a phone every 2 years that were, 16, 17 years old when it first came out. And every time they buy a new phone, is the first app they download is Subway Surfers. That's such a powerful tool, powerful window into becoming, part of people's everyday lives. It's crazy.
Do you need in-app purchases and in-app advertising to be a behemoth gaming company?
No, you can become a very successful gaming company with, regardless of your monetization. You have to monetize somehow, of course. But I think there are a lot of examples of behemoths that have in-app purchases, and I think with the emergence of companies like ours, you can see that actually either a dual monetization strategy or a in-app advertising driven strategy can also work very well. I think people have misunderstood the power of in-app advertising model, and I think we're starting to change people's minds about that.
Can I ask, how do you, this final one, and then we'll move into quick fire. I love this. How do you think about how AI changes the world of gaming, both in creation, distribution, consumption?
I mean, I think AI changes everything about everything, right? So I really,
Is it changing how you're operating internally at Tripledot?
Yes. So we use AI-driven tools that enable us to increase our productivity dramatically. So we use tools that in the old days it might have taken us X days to build a 3D model of a character to be used in a game, and now we use tools that actually bring that down to a few minutes. Right, so it's it changes everything from creation to operation, etc. But we're still in the early stages of this. The tools are still being developed as we go, and it's just a little bit up to us. So we're actually doing many things, many initiatives in the company across that. So we are looking at how we can use AI tools better in ideation, in monetization, in operation, on the creative side, on the marketing side.
You're an investor too. The thing that everyone says is, but they don't have any proprietary data. They're just a thin layer on top of X model. You have the data, actually. Yeah. Like, how do you think about investing in new AI tools when they don't have proprietary data?
I don't believe that should be the deciding factor, right? So first of all, I as an investor don't invest in kind of, large scale, like late stage companies, et cetera, et cetera. I invest, early on in people, read my friends who I know who do things in areas that I know. So, but I don't subscribe to a lot of the criticism about the business model because it will change. You don't have to have necessarily proprietary data to create a valuable business. You can offer tools, you can offer services that really change people's lives, and we see this every day today. So I think it's not a critical matter that they don't have proprietary data today. It doesn't mean they can't build an offering of something super valuable, I guess, tomorrow. And we use a tool today that they don't have a lot of proprietary data, but it's so powerful already that that's okay. So.
Listen, my friend, I want to move into a quick fire. So I say a short statement and then you give me your immediate thoughts. Does that sound okay?
Let's do it.
So what single piece of content has had the most impact on you?
It was a book about how to kind of overcome obsessive compulsive disorder. And, I suffered with OCD for many, many years. And I tried many, many things. And this book that I read, how to basically allow me to stop smoking. So it's a book called The Easy Way to Quit Smoking by Alan Carr. So that, I read this book when I was on holiday. It's not because I used to smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day. In Italian, there's a saying called smoking like a Turk, and I was the living embodiment of that, right? So someone gave me this book, said, look, you smoke way too much. When you go into an office, when you go into a room, the whole room stinks. So, why don't you read this book? And I put it in my bag, forgot about it, went on the holiday in Cyprus. And my wife is from Cyprus, so when we go to her parents' house, there's just not much to do there. So I started reading this book, and my whole life changed, not only because I stopped smoking, which is the best thing I've ever done. I stopped it in 3 days, by the way, just cold turkey, just overnight. But, the fundamental concept of reading words written on ink on a piece of paper enabled me to develop this willpower to overcome an addiction so strong as smoking was a complete mindfuck. And that definitely has to be the thing that's changed my life.
It's a very good answer. What's your single biggest fear?
My biggest fear revolves around my biggest why, which is my kids. So my fear is, will I equip them with the right things in life for them to have a meaningful life, happy life, meaningful life, a safe life. And my biggest fear is just, frankly, not being able to do that. Failing as a father is my biggest fear. Because, my father very famously did fail, and, but I was lucky enough that I had my grandmother around that it didn't matter. But I just want to make sure that...
How did your father, if you don't mind, impact how you approach fatherhood?
Sure, it's a good question. So my mother got married 4 times, which, and she's a brilliant businesswoman. She super
clearly
smart.
favored diversification too.
Yes, exactly. And it really actually shaped me because I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandparents didn't have a perfect marriage, but they did have a marriage, and they somehow made it work. And I look at that and I kind of really just said, I will never, I just can't understand, I really truly am not angry at my father. Like I don't really care too much about my father's existence one way or the other. It's not like I'm not angry at him. I just, I wish him the well, which is in many ways the worst thing you can say to a person, right? So I just want to make sure that
Have you told him that?
No, we don't really speak too much, and it's very, very rare that we speak. And for me to tell him that means that I do care, and I just don't really, frankly, care that much. But I could never understand how you can, abandon a responsibility, and it's the most beautiful responsibility. We were talking in the kitchen earlier. It's like, after having a kid, I almost look at people who don't have kids, and I say, oh man, do you know what you're missing? Do you know, your life, what it means for your life to have true meaning? And so that to me was, again, not being sappy, was I never felt that I grew up without a father because my grandfather and my grandmother were there for me. But that's my biggest fear, is how to make sure that my kids don't, go through that.
Whew, saved the meaty topic for last, didn't we? Fucking hell. What's the biggest lesson in terms of what it takes to hire the best people?
I would say be wary of etiquette. Don't hire for experience from the shiny company. Don't hire necessarily from the best school. If in doubt, hire someone from the, if you put a gun to my head between someone from, Oxford versus someone from, another university, I don't know the UK universities that well, I'd say, this person is equipped with, XYZ traits, but this person will probably be hungrier, right? So I'm not advocating that's the basis on which we hire, but we always try to hire based on hunger, based on grit, based on just approach. One of the things we say is we want to hire people who ask for forgiveness, not permission. And that is something that is probably the single best embodiment of the Tripledot recruiting culture. Is we want people who will do things, who will take initiative, bias for action, and then ask for forgiveness.
I always like tangibility, and I think one of the best questions to ask to determine whether someone has that is to say, tell me about the first time you made money.
Yes.
I find with great people who really have that hunger, they could have come from a rich family, from a poor family.
Yes.
I was probably in the middle. I remember buying and selling Nokia phones between different eBay sellers and buyers when I was 11.
Yes.
Like, do you see what I mean? Like, you just sense that early. No one's like, oh, I went to Stanford and I raised a seed round from first round and that was my first salary.
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I was selling homeworks to my friends, which was slightly illegal, by the way.
Homeworks?
Yeah. They would have these term homeworks in Turkey that would take you months and months. So it was a very non-scalable business. I actually learned the value of scalability back then. But I was, 11, 12, 13 years old when I was charging people real money. I'd say, I'll do your history homework, which would take you several months to do, and I'd sell that to people. So it does check out.
That is fucking amazing. What's the most painful lesson that you've learned that you're also pleased to have learned?
I struggle with this a little bit because at the end, I don't view things, I guess, as painful, even though they are painful when you're going through them, right? So the most painful experience of my life was losing my grandmother. She was, everything to me, and she just genuinely was the most amazing person. And when I look back, I kind of realized that, I was truly, for the first time, I felt like I was on my own, right? And I don't know if I learned a super valuable lesson there, but I did learn, I said, nothing at the end of the day matters. We will all die. And then I have a tendency to take negative and try to push it into positive. So actually that played a huge factor in my thinking, saying why I want to become an entrepreneur, why I want to do this, why I want to do that. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like if you knew how little people talked about you, you would not care about most things, right? So I really subscribe to that. I don't really care what, of course we all want to be loved and everything, but we'll all die. It won't matter. So I really believe that. And, worst case worse, I can always get a job at a Burger King or something, still make enough to, look after my family. So that's kind of how I went on this journey of starting a company. And it was a very non-trivial decision. When we first said, I'm going to start a mobile gaming studio, people thought I was like, from Mars, especially my friends I went to business school with. That was pretty funny.
I think it's helpful to remember that no one really gives a shit about
exactly.
They're caught up in their own shit.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Okay, tell me, what would you most like to change about the world of venture?
I think venture is so important, but I'm actually amazed how much we're all swimming in our own bullshit sometimes. And I say this because, there's and if you look at a lot of the venture capital, and I invest in companies, and a lot of times companies I think want to partner with me because I don't peddle the same bullshit to them. And I actually told afterwards that if I give any advice at all, it's just really kind of actionable stuff that comes from my own background. There's a little bit of it's very dangerous, I think, for VCs to give definitive advice to companies, because as a founder, you are thinking about what you're building, or if you should be thinking about what you're building 24/7. And it's very dangerous for someone to helicopter in for, even, let's say, an hour a week, in a month, or whatever it is, to give you advice, because they're not feeling the nuts and bolts of everything you're doing all the time. That's not what they're thinking about 24/7, right? At best, they are taking other lessons learned in other companies, translating them, putting them through a filter, and then telling you what they think applies to your case. It might be good, but it might be horrible too, and it can be quite dangerous, right? So I don't believe that. I believe that the best founders, and I know actually the best founders, talk about the quote-unquote value-add VC firms and giggle, because I don't think a VC can truly add operational value to a truly exceptional founder. I'm happy to be proven wrong otherwise.
Why do you think that is? Like, there's just this company now that we're investing in. I'm very grateful to have your support as an LP in the fund, called Bachama. I just introduced them and really helped them hire their new head of sales.
Sure.
Is that not value add?
I mean, maybe, but that's you've introduced. Different type of operational value add. You introduced them to someone who they ended up hiring, but they probably put them into their own filter and
sure.
And
so they hired them, not me. They convinced them.
I'm not saying you will not do something that will help them, right? But it's the idea of you should partner with us because we can help you in XYZ fashion is very dangerous, and it's just not other people, I'm sure, have introduced them, sure. etc. And people introduce us. Our investors, other people, Lightspeed, Access, Eldridge, Velo Partners, they've all helped us in XYZ fashion. But I don't think if you tell them they wouldn't, I would say, go around and say, Tripledot is Tripledot because of what we're doing, right? And I mean, I could be wrong, but there's a lot of venture capitalists, especially in the US, that will say, oh, we did this company and then we introduced them to this. They ended up doing this deal, and therefore, and so the implication here is that they've really played an outsized role into that company. And if you think about it, the biggest value add I think that a VC can have on a company is really just to be there for the bad times, and just be a friend in the good times. So if you have a company that you build and 5 years later you want to really go the distance, right? And you want to really grow this thing, and maybe you want to do some secondary. And that's when the true kind of friendship will come out. It's like, do I feel comfortable enough just telling you, hey man, listen, I want to do some secondary, or, hey, I think we should buy XYZ company. What do you think? Those are the kind of conversations that really will determine and I think it's a very different philosophy because I really, I'm not a venture capitalist, right? So I don't invest with an, view towards portfolio construction and deployment velocity or something like that.
Neither do VCs looking at velocities.
Fair enough, right? But I do think that, this is a game that I believe that the best founders really know kind of what they're good at, what they're bad at. And your job as a VC, I think, is to be there, offer support when they need, not to necessarily push support down their throat in times when, they might not need or,
Oh, I think honestly I win a lot of the time because people we know that Harry's going to sit back and respond when we message him, but otherwise not get in our way.
But that is so important, actually, right? Because you are not, pretending to know about their details of their business dealings day in, day out, right? And I think it's very important because other people don't do that. I can tell you that, other people, and I've seen situations where in board meetings, VCs will ask them, hey, have you done an analysis on XYZ and how you prepare? And you're literally eating into operational time of that founder for something that, you want to scratch your own kind of, intellectual itch. That is actually value destruction. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, sure, there are cases where you can add value, like the case that, you introduce that person and so on. But, I don't think that's kind of what you say, right? You don't say, partner with me because people partner with you because you're a nice guy, you're very smart, you'll be around for a long time, and you provide them a buffet of options that they can tap into should they choose to.
Nailed it. That's exactly myself.
Yeah. So
thank you. Welcome to the team. Penultimate one. What's the biggest misalignment between founders and VCs?
Yeah, I think the biggest misalignment is it happens when things are going exceptionally well or things are going exceptionally bad. I think the kind of gray area in between are, you can debate, but, a friend of mine has a very successful public company, and he mentioned the time that every time, the stock would come down, the investors would ultimately sell as much of their shares as possible, which would put downward pressure on the stock more. And so I would say very few VCs are really long-term people in general, right? Like you have a horizon that you want to exit and totally understand that's the business, right? So I'd fully appreciate that. But it is a misalignment because if you partner with a truly exceptional founder, you want to be as long-term greedy as possible, not short-term greedy. Yeah. I think that's the main one. I think that's the time horizon of your partnership and liquidity needs. I
also think outcome scenario planning. It matters to me that you are a $5-10 billion company. It depends on the size of the fund, but I'm just kind of doing a $300 million exit for most funds doesn't really move the needle in any meaningful way.
Yes.
So I'm going to give you advice that is aggressively oriented around growth, customer acquisition, in a trajectory that will align to my outcome desires. Well, actually, if you have a $300 million exit and you own 10% or 20% or something, That's pretty great.
Yes.
And so it will skew the advice that you give as an investor and the advice you receive as a founder because of the differing benefits of outcome to each party.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, if you are, if you weren't an investor in a business, but if you were just kind of talking to a friend who's the founder, your advice to them would be like, you have to do what's
So
right
different.
for you. So different, right? So that's the main misalignment. But I do believe at the end of the day, heart of hearts, that you're in the business of backing exceptional people, and if you have high conviction that they're truly exceptional, more often than not, you'll rid them of the burdens of returns. Is that they also in return have to understand your needs as an investor. And I think the best relationships that I've seen, both sides are, hey, this is what I want to do. These are my constraints. Help me reach those. Help me solve those problems. So that's what I think is.
Okay, final one.
Yes.
Next 5 years for you, 2028. What does Akin look like then?
Hopefully alive, right? It's such a, I don't know. I have no idea, to be honest. And I'm just really enjoying it right now. Who knows in 5 years, who knows what I'll do in 5 months, to be honest, right? Like, it's just right now we're doing things that are, truly, I'm amazed that, we are at the scale that we are in, and, we're really having a great time. I also do believe that we have this ability to build a generational company. So, it's very rare that you are at a moment in time that Tripledot is in at the moment, right? We are in a place where, we have great growth. We have a phenomenal team. So why not just try to just go the distance and try to build this, truly generational company? And I don't mean generational as I want my grandkids or Leor's grandkids or Eyal's grandkids to run it. But why not just try to build the most successful company that you can? So far, we're having a huge amount of fun trying to do that. At the same time, I do really love, people say, hey, you're an investor, etc. Like, I don't view myself necessarily as a professional investor. I think I happen to give people advice, free of charge, by the way. I don't have to invest. That is truly from the heart. That is real. That is not covered in layers of bullshit. And people really like it. And people choose to, work with me on that basis. And I really enjoy that as well. So, but to be honest, all the professional stuff aside, because that's truly secondary. I think the personal health, well-being, family health, being in a good place with my wife, being in a good place with my kids, that takes precedence above everything else. So if I can be there, that's the most important thing.
I always say, work with great people you respect and admire, and good shit happens.
100%.
And I think our relationship really is kind of the embodiment of that. And I so appreciate you as my friend. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
And I've loved it.
Loved it too. Thank you so much.
My man. Boom.